Let's take a look at the last couple questions in section 6.4. In questions 9 and 10, you're given some information and you're asked to write the sine and cosine functions based on the information you're given. So let's go back and take a look real quick at the standard equation of the sine function and the cosine function. Standard form of the equation for the sine function is y is equal to a sine bx. For cosine, it's y is equal to a cosine bx, where a is the amplitude, recall that the amplitude is the distance between the sinusoidal axis and the maximum, or the sinusoidal axis and the minimum. Okay, then recall that the period of the function is equal to 2 pi over b, and the period is 1 full cycle. Okay, so now when we look at 9a, we're given the amplitude and we're given the period. The period, 10 pi, is equal to 2 pi over b. So b is equal to 2 pi over 10 pi, which is 1/5. So now we have the amplitude and we have our value of b. We can go ahead and write our sine function. Y is equal to 5 sine 1/5 x. For b, we're given the amplitude is 3, and we're given the period is 5 pi over 2. That's equal to 2 pi over b. So b is equal to 2 pi times 2 over 5 pi, which is 4/5. So now we have our value of b, we have our amplitude, we're looking for the sine curve. Y is equal to 3 sine 4/5 x. And finally, the last one, which is c, we're given the amplitude is 100 and the period is 24. So 24 is equal to 2 pi over b. So b is equal to 2 pi over 24, or pi over 12. So the equation for this sine curve is y is equal to 100 sine pi over 12x. So if you're given the amplitude and you're given the period, you can find that value of b and go ahead and write that equation. In question 10, we're actually given the curve and asked to find the equation of that particular graph. First thing we're going to look at is determine if it's a sine function or a cosine function. Remember that a sine function starts at the origin, cosine function will start at the maximum or the minimum at this point. We're going to have some phase shifts coming up in section 6.6, but for right now we are looking at, does it start at the origin or does it start at the max or the min? So for this first function, when I look at it, it starts at the maximum. So that tells me that this is going to be a cosine function. So I know I have cosine theta. When I look for the amplitude, remember I'm looking for that distance from the sinusoidal axis, which happens to be on the x-axis here, to that maximum point. So I know that A is equal to 5. Then I have to look to find the period. Starts at the y-axis, goes down through the x-axis, hits the minimum, comes back up through the x-axis, and hits its maximum again. So that tells me that the period is 8. So to find my value of b, I'll take 2 pi over b is equal to 8. So b is equal to 2 pi over 8, or pi over 4. So my value of b is pi over 4. So when I want to write this equation, y is equal to the amplitude, 5, times cosine b, pi over 4, x. Let's take a look at b. This time, I know it again doesn't start at the origin, so I know that this is cosine theta. The value from the sinusoidal axis, right here, to the minimum or to the maximum is 3. So A is equal to 3. I also note that this is reflected about the x-axis. And if you remember your transformations, that means that the function is negative. So I have one more thing to find, and that's the value of b. So it starts at the minimum, goes through the x-axis to the maximum, back down through the x-axis to the minimum again. So that's one full cycle. So I know that the period is 4 pi. Now I'll use that to find my value of b. So 2 pi over b equals 4 pi. So 2 pi over 4 pi equals b. So b is equal to 1/2. So now I'm going to write the equation of this cosine function. Y is equal to negative 3 cosine 1/2 x. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do d. We'll take a look at d. We notice that this begins at the origin. So this is a sine function. The sinusoidal axis is again on the x-axis. The difference between the sinusoidal axis and my max or min is 1, the absolute value of the difference. So A is equal to 1. The period goes from the y-axis to the minimum, back through the x-axis to the maximum, and returns to the sinusoidal axis at 4 pi over 3. So the period is equal to 4 pi over 3. So now I have to find my value of b. So 2 pi over b is equal to 4 pi over 3. So b is equal to 2 pi times 3 over 4 pi. So my value of b is going to be 3/2. So now I have the value of b. I know it's a sine function. I have the amplitude. It reflects about the x-axis. So I can go ahead and write that equation. Y is equal to negative sine 3/2 x. You can go ahead and complete questions C, E, and F, as well as the other questions in section 6.4. We'll go over them on Monday. I will see you then. Have a nice weekend.